Hello, everyone, and welcome to GrizPaths. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jay Beagle, and I'm the Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for UMAA, and I will be moderating today's panel. I'm joined here by three wonderful panelists right now who have all made huge impacts in the field of law and policy. And each of them are in very different areas of law, so I'm excited to hear each and everyone's perspectives. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone in this conversation that the Q&A function is open. So if anyone has any questions for our panelists throughout this call, please just drop those in there and I will make sure that your questions get asked. So we can go ahead and get started now, and I will let our panelists introduce themselves. And if you would like to say your name, your current role, and what led you to a career in law. Any of you can take it away.
My name's Asa. I own a mid-sized law firm with offices in Alaska and Montana, and we do business in North Dakota and the kind of western states. And I practice almost exclusively in immigration. Actually, I practice exclusively in immigration. The firm practices almost exclusively in immigration as well. And what led me into the law? That is a long and winding question that would probably use up way too much time for this little meeting. But I think I was just always headed towards the law in my trajectory in life. And so it kind of happened pretty organically. I went to UM for both undergrad, and then it was natural transition to go to law school there. I love Missoula and I love UM. So it was an easy pathway for me and an easy decision to make. I don't think there was ever really a second law school that I wanted to go to. And I've been very happy with the outcomes that I've experienced being a UM UM alumni, and everything that's kind of opened for me, as well as the network. I know both the panelists that are here with me today, and I think that's really common for law grads at the University of Montana and really undergrad alum as well at the University of Montana. We're such a strong network. It's always nice to see familiar faces all around the United States and even worldwide.
I can go next. I'm Tori Nickel, and I currently am an assistant United States attorney in the District of Montana. So I am assigned to the criminal division, and I primarily prosecute violent crime arising on the Fort Belknap and Rocky Boys Indian reservations. And then I also prosecute drug trafficking and firearm offenses throughout the district. What led me to a career in the law? Unlike Asa, I'm not sure the law felt inevitable to me. I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I enjoyed reading and I enjoyed writing, and I wanted to be helpful in some capacity, and I felt like the skills that I wanted to cultivate sort of naturally fit into the law. So I'm happy I ended up here, and happy to be a U of M grad, and happy to see Asa again.
And I'm Cody Meixner. It's nice to be on this panel with Asa, who I've known for a long time, and Tori, who I just met. But I'm Associate General Counsel at Georgetown University, so I'm a lawyer in its in-house legal office. I advise on student affairs and employment matters, which can run the gamut of just about any sort of issue that arises at any university. I did not, like Tori, I didn't necessarily think I was going to go to law school or be involved in legal practice. I had a friend who was taking the LSAT our senior year, and I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school for a master's in public administration, and I took the LSAT with her kind of for fun. I did not do incredibly well, but I did okay enough to just tack law school onto my graduate program that I was already committed to. The rest was history. In those joint programs, your first year is kind of all law typically, and then you transition to incorporate the graduate programs. So, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little more, but at that point, being so hyper-focused on law, I started to think about the other things I already knew and kind of what graduate work would be included. And so I leaned really heavily on my experience at UM, being involved there, learning about higher ed, and that kind of set me on the track to combine higher ed and legal practice and my graduate experience as well, which was great. I wouldn't practice in any other field, I think, if I had the option. I'm very happy in my area. So that's my path to law school, a little non-traditional.
Great. Well, thank you all three of you for that quick introduction there. You've all kind of said a little bit, but can you describe what role did your education at U of M play in preparing you for your career?
I might just go right away. I was involved in ASUM, the student government, and I was surprised, I think, by how much, how the degree of expertise I developed in that capacity and just higher ed and learning about higher ed as a field. I think UM is really unique in its focus on practical experience, whether it's within the university or elsewhere in the community, or in the country. But that focus on practical experience, I think, was really helpful to me and translated to the application of the legal principles that I developed in law school right away. Those types of opportunities in an undergraduate program, I think, are exceedingly rare, having worked at many institutions of higher education. So I think UM set me up really well in unexpected ways to take that practical experience, and the classroom experience, of course, but the practical experience, and then combine it with the graduate skills that I had.
I echo what Cody said in terms of the value of the practical skills that U of M exposed me to, and something that personally for me was very important about going to U of M was that I spent a few years clerking after law school, and both of the judges for whom I clerked were U of M law school alumni, and that connection, I think, was very valuable, and then it helped me make connections with other U of M alumni who had also clerked for those judges. So for me personally, that was a very important, not something I knew at the time I was going to do when I applied to law school, but that turned out to be really important. And then this is more of a soft thing that was important to me about going to law school in Missoula. I think Asa said he loved Missoula. I also love Missoula, and I feel like where the law school is situated in the community, you're not entirely immersed in the law bubble. You're still in the community. There's opportunities to make connections outside of the school itself, and that has been really valuable for me as a law student in terms of maintaining mental health and some sanity, and also maintaining perspective that the law is only as valuable as we can apply it to the real world, which means that we have to be able to interact and live in the real world. So I really appreciated that U of M gave me the opportunity to go to law school and get a really good education and do it in a place where I could also fortify the other parts of my life.
I think that the University of Montana as a whole, both undergraduate and graduate programs, because I have experience in both. I have my law degree and my MBA from UM and my undergrad from UM as well. And then I went to UW for a while for my LLM. So I have some knowledge there. I think that the University of Montana does an incredible job of preparing students for their careers after school, after scholastics. And I truly believe that the University of Montana is a top-ranked university. I think we get hamstrung in our national rankings by the nature of our graduates. A lot of our graduates want to stay in Montana or the Pacific Northwest. They're not trying to go into big law. They're not trying to go work for corporations. They're not trying to, branch out into the coastal areas of the country. They're married to the lifestyle of Montana or the Pacific Northwest, the Rocky Mountain West. And I think a lot of times that naturally results in our incredible alumni going and having incredible careers, just not the same type of careers that you might see at schools that get ranked slightly higher than us. But I do believe that the University of Montana provides an excellent education that rivals any top university, especially regional university. I think it's just as good as, the University of Washington or many schools in California. And I think that what sets it apart, which both Tori and Cody have talked about, is the experience that you get there, especially the hands-on experience. I don't think there's many universities where you can, as an undergrad, sit in meetings that are, comprised of the president or the governor of the state, or have the opportunity to actually take professional positions in the university, in the alumni association, or with athletics, or with advising, and actually have semi-professional positions while you're still in undergrad or in law school. I think that's incredibly unique.
Well, great. Before I go to the next question, I just want to introduce Jamie real fast, who's our fourth panelist who's just able to join us. So Jamie, if you can give your quick introduction, just your name and got you into law and what your job is now. Just go ahead and take that away. If you can hear us or if it's working. Okay. Quiet. I'm not able to hear anything right now. I will go on to your stuff's working, then I will hop on real fast. I will fix that, Jamie. But I'm going to get on to the next question first. This is, how did you land your first job or internship, and were there any unexpected turns?
My first internship in law school was because of a connection. It was in-house at the University of Montana's legal office, again, using connections and experiences that I was able to develop at as an undergrad. Most in-house offices, whether it's at a university or a private company, they don't typically accept 1Ls, first-year law students as interns. Of course, there are exceptions, but I think generally speaking, that's true. And Lucy France, the general counsel at I think made a little bit of an exception, and it really set me up for the rest of my career in higher ed. I think that first internship is so important because, it really sets a foundation and gives you some of the experience that you can use to get the next one and the next one, or think about what other types of experiences you might want to pursue after that to round out your legal knowledge. But in any event, it was back to for me for that first summer. And I went to law school in DC, unlike Asa and Tori. So I finished undergrad and then left, but I couldn't stay away for too long.
My first internship in law school was with Blackstone Launchpad, which is in Missoula. It's a business incubator at the university, which was a natural fit for me at the time because I thought I was going into tax and business law. I ended up going into immigration law, so it really had no relevance on the long term of my career. Making that an equally convoluted path was after law school. I went to the University of Washington to get my LLM, and then COVID hit right as I was graduating. So that made my time after, like, my first years professionally kind of awkward because of COVID. And then I fell super organically into immigration law and have been practicing exclusively immigration law since then. And that was also just through connections through the university, people that I knew. And it took me to Alaska, and that's where I've been since then. So kind of chaotic and not at all planned, but a good pathway for me.
I feel like my answer is relatively boring compared to those two answers. My first internship in law school, I worked at a law firm in Missoula, and I got that job after doing on-campus interviews, which is the standard 1L way most people get jobs. And then my first job out of law school, I was a law clerk on the Ninth Circuit, and I applied for that job when I was in my second year of law school, even though I didn't start it until after my third year. And that was with Judge Sidney Thomas, who, as I mentioned, was a U of M alum, and I'm sure that the schools that we went to at least helped me get an interview, but I feel that's not a super exciting answer, so I'm glad Asa and Cody had better ones.
All right, Jamie, is your unmute now working?
Is that working?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
sweet.
it is.
Sorry.
Okay, we're
And
all good to go.
sorry to be late.
Oh, not
was
a
a
big deal
daycare
at all.
closure.
It's all good.
There was a daycare closure, and so this morning got hijacked for me.
That
So
is
thanks for your
totally
help.
understandable. It is all right. Life happens sometimes. So
Yeah,
we're glad you're able to join us.
thank you.
Yeah, if you want to give a quick introduction real fast and just your current role and what kind of led you to a career in law, and then we were just talking about first job.
Cool. Yeah. So I am actually both. I have an active bar member, and then I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So while I was at the University of Montana for law school, I decided to also get my MSW, and the two schools worked beautifully together to allow me to do that. And credits crossed over, and so I was pretty grateful for that, to be able to do both. And then after I got my MSW, I chose to do it's called candidacy, and then you can become an active like mental health therapist after candidacy, or through candidacy, and then after. So currently I kind of am trying to blend those two things, which has been interesting, and have found that where I'm liking is in roles in family law cases where parents have been in litigation for extended periods of time, years. Have one that's been over a decade, and so it's called parent coordination and sometimes guardian ad litem. So currently I have my own entity, practice on my own, don't litigate, but do those two roles, parent coordination and guardian ad litem, and then also do some mental health therapy. And so that's been really wonderful and flexible to be able to do that on my own. So yeah. First internship was maybe similar to Tori's. It was at a law firm in Helena, between my 1L and 2L year, and yeah, I was grateful. It was through someone I knew, kind of the person who maybe was a driver in me going to law school in the first place, and so got to kind of learn under them at their law firm for a summer. I'm really grateful for that experience.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, I'm glad that you were able to hop on and join us today. So once again, anyone who is on the call, if you have any questions for our panelists at all, please drop those in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will make sure I get those asked. But our next question is, what are some key skills that are in high demand today, and how can students or early professionals develop these?
Before I answer that question, I just wanted to point out that Tori said
Yes.
my path after law school wasn't that exciting, and then proceeded to say that she clerked for the Ninth Circuit, which I thought was ironic, but or maybe like a humble brag, I don't know, but I loved it. I'm here for it. To answer that question, skills that are in high demand. So I at my firm, we are hiring attorneys as well as paralegals, legal assistants. We are on a constant hiring cycle, pretty much. And then I own a non-related business in Billings as well, that's in the kind of the outdoor sector, and we're always hiring there too. I think that the biggest skill that I need, that I find many times to be a shortcoming, is critical thinking. I think that's the ability to do rote tasks that aren't challenging. We have so many people who can fill those positions, and they seem like they are readily filled, although also in high demand. I think people coming out of school, whether it's undergraduate or even high school or law school, but that then have the additional ability to think critically and think independently and push themselves through discomfort and maintain a sense of curiosity. That, I think, is the most critical skill you can have, especially as a young professional, certainly in the field of the law. And I also think it's one of the parts that we are maybe most deserving students, not at the University of Montana, but as a whole, most deserving students is pushing that critical thinking, making sure students are uncomfortable while they are learning, because learning on your own after graduation, when you have entered the workforce, learning is uncomfortable. And being able to push through that to find answers, to find solutions, to be a person who seeks out, possible solutions rather than just brick walls of problems. That's what employers are looking for, or at least it's what we're looking for all the time, and what we value and what we reward. Certainly, how we promote is whether or not you are able to think on your own and find answers and feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
I was going to say the same thing. Critical thinking, I think, is most important. So I won't harp on that. I might add, relatedly, even though it seems obvious, attention to detail. I think, a component of that is knowing that maybe an A through Z protocol is not always appropriate for the situation, and you have to think about the issue you're trying to address, the task you're trying to accomplish, the goal you're working toward, and make sure that the work product you're putting together is tailored toward that and not generic, not filled with typos, not inapplicable in any way. So that's all I would add to that. I think it's surprising how many people do not have the attention to detail that I think is really crucial in any field, but especially in law.
Yeah, agree about the importance of critical thinking and attention to detail. So I'm going to throw something out there that's less highbrow, which is just the ability to get on the phone and call people when something needs to get done, or similar to what Cody was just speaking about, reading an email and actually absorbing what that email is requesting or what correspondence it's going to call for. But some of the interpersonal skills that seem like it's a weird piece of advice to say, get comfortable picking up the phone, but it really, especially if you're a practicing attorney, you can resolve so many issues simply by calling the opposing counsel. And to that end, it's also really valuable to just learn how to be cordial and collegial. And that's something that's really special about the bar in Montana, because it's so small. We all interact with each other over and over. So being able to say, like, yes, I wouldn't have an issue if a supervisor asked me to call another office and get this material or ask them about this thing, or I can read an email and comprehend what it's asking me to do, and I can respond in a way that's not going to reflect poorly on the office. These kind of teeny tiny skills that don't seem like the big things, but over time they add up and they are really, really important. And especially for, I never had to go to school during COVID, so I'm aware that that posed some problems. And I imagine for some of the people who might be listening to this chat, they had to do some remote learning that made some cultivation of those types of skills more difficult, but they are really important in practice. So being able to pick up the phone, send an email, do those sort of day-to-day interpersonal skills matter.
I think what came to mind for me piggybacks like really beautifully off of what everyone has said as well, of, and it's an interesting thing to say for lawyers, but conflict resolution, that like emotion regulation in conflict. I had a therapist mentor tell me that she thinks lawyers are some of the most conflict averse people, which I thought was a really interesting reflection from her. And then as I kind of watch, it's kind of interesting to watch, right? And so being able to step into even smaller conflicts, right? Picking up the phone, like Tori was saying, and resolving any level of conflict, right? Hopefully earlier rather than later, and then we don't have to use the litigation process, right? But at least in family law, right? So yeah, my ad would be conflict resolution skills. And
well, awesome. So law and policy careers can take many different forms, as it obviously shows with you all having very different, areas and career paths. But how could you describe the range of opportunities that are available in this field to anyone who's looking to go into law?
Broad.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I think maybe aside from a bachelor's degree, a law degree is probably the most versatile degree available in American higher education. That said, I also typically, when people, undergraduates want to talk about whether they should go to law school, I find myself repeating advice that Asa gave me when I was in my senior year of college, which is law school pushes you to be a lawyer. And so if you want to be a lawyer, go to law school. And if you're not sure about whether you want to be a lawyer, think about the realities of law school. And it's a lot of debt, some heavy workloads and long nights on occasion. But generally speaking, I think law school pushes you to practice law. However, it opens a ton of other doors in other fields that I think are very, very rewarding and worthwhile.
Does anybody else want to add anything else?
I totally agree with what Cody said. The only thing I wanted to add was that if you can, because it is advice that I gave and still actually frequently give, but if you can push through law school and then a couple years in practice, I think that there's so many opportunities that you can do. I think sometimes coming out of law school, you are a little bit hamstrung, and I don't think we talk about that enough with prospective students. It's not necessarily the easiest transition to graduate law school and then get a non-law field path. That can be a tricky jump. It can happen, but it is challenging. But I think if you're willing to go to law school and then be in practice for 2 or 3 years, at that point in time, so many things open up to you: policy, executive direction, management. There's so many things that you can do at that point in time. But if you are really adverse to practice, it can be a pretty challenging jump.
So kind of along those same lines, on the other end of it, for those who are unsure about law school, what are some alternative yet related careers that they could consider?
I feel like Jamie's the expert on this one, so I'll let her speak more to it. But in my line of work, we do a lot of overlap with social work, and we're serving a lot of the same people and seeing a lot of the same issues. So I think of that as a law adjacent career. And being in the position that I'm currently in, there's a lot of really interesting investigative agency type steps that I just had no idea existed until I became a lawyer and then got to work with some of these people. So there's everything from lab techs who support DNA type evidence testing. There's the people who are actually out in the field, like agents and law enforcement, who become part of putting together a case that can be prosecuted. There's the people who work with victims. There's the people who work with defendants in some sort of capacity, like probation or parole. So there's a lot of, in the criminal side of things at least, there's all of these really important players that I just didn't have occasion to encounter until I became a lawyer, but their jobs are really interesting and particularly well suited to people who are interested in the aspect of the law that allows them to work with people and are maybe a little less sure that they want to spend hours at a keyboard or in front of a computer screen.
Jamie, did you want to add anything there?
I guess when I think of policy, I think it's in every industry. I mean, it's in healthcare, it's in everyone's reading rules and trying to figure out how to help them help people, right? And so I think things like policy or rule writing or I think that's in many, just everywhere. So, finding what you're passionate about and then the policy side of that, I think, would be what I would say of, if it's quality, if it's, helping people do their jobs better, things like that. It's in a lot of areas. So.
Great. So since you all are, very different sectors of law, we have higher ed, private firms, attorney general office. How did you decide between working in public, private, or like nonprofit sectors, and a little bit of the differences between those, if you could describe that?
I, mentioned that higher ed kind of clicked for me, I think in part because of my experience at UM, in large part because of my experience at UM. And, I'm a first gen college student as well. And, as a result, just really believe fundamentally in the goals of higher education and higher education as a mechanism for social change, socioeconomic change. I think it's perhaps, aside from climate change, one of the most fundamental, important investments that our country can make, educating people to go on and do great things, to be civic members of society. And so I knew I wanted to work in higher ed in some capacity. This ended up being a good combination for me. I feel like I have the opportunity to help institutions run better. And, we do a lot of advising about litigation risks and, kind of trying to address conflicts before they occur and then overcoming conflicts when they occur. But we do a lot of proactive work as well, helping develop policies, helping enhance procedures, helping just give good, sound advice. And I think from my perspective, being able to serve higher ed institutions is really rewarding for me. And whether you go like I did in-house, or you're at a firm that advises institutions, or you have the opportunity to go to think tanks that develop research relevant to this area. There are a lot of different ways you can do it, but I think for me, I wanted to stick to my passion, and then the rest goes from there. And I think, as we talked about in the last question, a law degree allows you to work in a field that you're passionate about in a variety of ways. So for me, it was about the field first, and then kind of how exactly I wanted to use the law degree to further the field.
I worked in private practice briefly. I think AC used the word convoluted earlier, and I've had a little bit of a convoluted journey to get to where I am now. And my first 3 years out of law school, I was clerking and in the federal judiciary in that capacity. And I was really struck by the way that people who worked in that branch of government saw themselves as true public servants, and they felt like their careers were really aligned with this calling to try to serve the public to the best of their ability, and just to try to make things a little bit better every day. And that really impacted me right out of law school. And I applied to work in some public sector positions. And in an important lesson I would also be happy to talk about, I didn't get all of the jobs that I applied for. And so I went and worked in a private firm and had a really good experience. But kind of what Cody was saying of, I think that if you find a passion, it's very clear to yourself when you are working in a place that allows you to access that passion every day. And that's not how I felt when I was working in a civil firm. And so I realized that I think that my calling, at least right now, is to work in public service. And that's what led me to I did a fellowship for a year, and then I came to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I feel like this is just where personally my skill set makes the most sense. I feel fulfilled, and I hope that I'm moving the needle a little bit in a good direction every day.
Sir Jamie, do you have anything to add?
I think that, well, I think that one of the things about going to law school and then, practicing the law is that we are, as a group, writ large, people who want to help people. I mean, I think that is a common trend. I mean, not everybody, like some people just watch Suits too many times and want to make money, but most of us, I think, who go to law school are servants at heart. We are individuals who want to advocate for other individuals. And whether we do that through policy work or whether we do that through, public defense or, working for nonprofits or whether we do it in private practice, I think a lot of it is just a servant attitude, an attitude towards service and towards advocacy. And so for me, landing in immigration was nothing that I could have ever planned. I didn't even conceive of it as an area of the law going to the University of Montana. It's not something that you can really even study there, or at least not when I was there. But coming out of that, it is, daily service to vulnerable populations. And I think that so much of the law is that, where there's not, I mean, obviously there's, corporate defense and things like that. But if you, as I do, if you truly believe in the aspirations of the American legal system, not necessarily what it is, but what it aspires to be, then there's really no pathway you can take in it that isn't serving the public benefit and the public good.
I think for me, public versus private, especially as a younger attorney, is a little bit about your own wellness too, finding a place that is a fit, right? It might be in a public setting, a public service setting, or it might be in a law firm. And I know I have a number of classmates that have tried a number of spots and both gone in and out, right? And so kind of about personal wellness too. Because I think burnout is a pretty significant factor. I also working in mental health too, right? But I think I see it in just as many classmates in the law as I do in mental health. And so just protecting yourself and finding a space that will protect you too, and honor your boundaries. So then I think both private and public can burn you out. So.
Great. I love hearing all of those different perspectives. I'm going to switch gears a little tiny bit here and talk a little bit more about networking. So is there any mentors or networking opportunities in your career, in your life, that really made a significant difference in your career?
For me, just choosing the University of Montana was high on the list of networking possibilities. I think that because the University of Montana is a big, small school, you have the opportunity to network with and get to know professionals in various fields, and you have the opportunity to get to know them really well. That was true also at the law school. When you're interacting with our professors there, they have large networks. They came from practice. They are practitioners themselves. And certainly it was the case in undergraduate as well. I know everybody on this call I know. And I think that you have that opportunity, not just by the nature of the University of Montana, also by the nature of Montana itself. But it's kind of hard to, I can't really take any credit for my networking, like the people that I know or the network that I have. It's just the nature of the university that I chose. I think that you would be hard pressed to be involved at the University of Montana in any one of their colleges and not come out with a strong network, professional network and personal network.
Anybody else want to share any mentor or any networking? No.
I'll just say I've had some success Googling people, right? Like I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm in a niche, right? Like role, but had some success just starting to Google and reach out to people that looked like they were doing something similar to what I was doing, and just asking for their time, sometimes paying for their time, which is fine. And doing some like consultation with them and learning from them. Maybe that's a little bit more learning than networking, but not afraid to grow it that way.
Yeah, I mean, learning and networking are very, very well connected there. How can students or alumni build genuine connections with professionals in your industry?
I think Jamie's answer to the last one was great for this too. I think lawyers, generally speaking, enjoy talking about themselves and their own experience, and I think you'd be maybe surprised that if you just reach out to a lawyer who has the job you want or works in an area you're interested in and ask to talk about it and talk about what got them there, their connections with mentors, what internships they did, whether they enjoy the field, I think they'll be pretty open with you and honest. And then that ties back to the last question, and that's a network that you start to build in areas you're interested in, and maybe you'll learn from those conversations that you're not actually very interested in that area based on what you're hearing. But it's still a good connection to have, and lots of people change practice areas or careers many years into their profession, and you may be on the opposite side of that at some point if you're in an area that they become interested in. I think it can be a small world in that way, but yeah, I would not be afraid to just Google and reach out to people who have interesting jobs, and I think they'll talk about it with you.
I agree with Cody. I think that's great advice, and especially if you're particularly passionate about a certain type of law or about an issue, or you're just curious, people are, in my experience, have always been happy to meet with someone who expresses a genuine just curiosity in what they can learn. So nothing to add but to echo Cody.
Well, to add on a little bit more to these questions, what are some ways that you all continue learning and staying current?
I'm lucky. I have my professional association for my area, the National Association of College and University Attorneys, NACUA, is a great organization, and I feel like every higher ed lawyer in the country is a member, and it kind of what Tori was saying and Asa and Jamie about the Montana Bar. It's a great community of people who share practice interests, shared advocacy interests, shared experiences, and I found them really willing to talk offline with you about issues that they may be experiencing that you may have come up for you for the first time. So I lean pretty heavily on my national association for that, for continuing legal education.
Great. Well, I do have a couple of questions in the Q&A here that I would love to ask from people in the audience. So I'll ask a couple of those real fast. The first one is, how does the often repeated phrase rule of law affect your relationships with clients, associates, or other lawyers in opposing positions?
There's a quote from Judge Malloy, who's a district court judge in Missoula, who I clerked for, and he used to always say, the rule of law is something we all do together. And I think that's such a really wonderful way of speaking to everything we want the law to be, and it sometimes doesn't live up to that promise. But when I find myself in a courtroom, usually talking about what was the worst day in someone's life, or perhaps many people's lives, including the defendants, the law feels much less like some sort of aspirational, or not aspirational, theoretical rule, and much more like the framework that we are all just trying to fit our lives within so that we can get through this space of being human as best we can. So I always, when I hear the phrase rule of law, I think of Judge Malloy saying it's just something we all do together.
Anybody else want to add anything? Asa?
Yeah, well, I operate in a unique area of the law where phrases like the rule of law are used to abuse and exploit people. And so, when you're talking about immigration, people will throw around phrases like the rule of law or, following the law or doing things legally. And it's really weaponized. So I probably have a different relationship with those types of phrases than the other folks on the panel. And because of that, I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I do. But as I said earlier, I think that the aspirational rule of law, what we aspire for the justice system to be, is beautiful, and that is something that I truly deeply believe in when it's not being weaponized.
Cool. Well, I will move on to the next question if we're all good there. Yes? Okay. This one is from Haley, and she's asking, as alumni, what was the community like at School of Law, and what did you like the most? What do you recommend jumping into at the campus that helped you get through law school? Not all at once.
For me, law school was a struggle for me, partially because I was involved in a lot of other activities at the same time that made it hard to, just deeply focus on law school. But also just because the entire time I wasn't sure that I any longer wanted to be there. So that was a challenge for me during law school. I'm glad that I stuck with it because of the network of people that I know from it, as I've mentioned many times. For me, the things that I did during law school that helped me get through it were participation on the teams. Like I was on negotiations team, and that helped. And also just getting to know the professors. I think that the benefit to going to a smaller law school is that you can really get to know your professors and lean on them for career advice, for guidance, for even just, a friendly ear when you're talking about the struggles of law school. Anybody who thinks that, like law school is not an easy thing to do. And so just having somebody there who can kind of keep pushing you through it and keeping you on track is really beneficial. And then getting out of law school. I think that's the most critical thing that you can do is not spend your entire day in the law library, or at we have cubes that we spent all of our lives in, but getting out, like going and enjoying walks and hikes and fishing and hunting and all of those things. I think that's honestly the most important thing you can do no matter what law school you go to.
Anything else, Jamie?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting to hear you say, Asa, because I also really struggled in law school, and finding a few friends that are lifelong friends now, and but kind of became deeper friends through that difficulty. I think like a practical thing in law school that I found out too late was getting an outline from an upperclassman on a class, especially like con law or something. I didn't really know what it was, and then it made it so much easier once I had someone ahead of me who was really good at it, had that framework for me to work from and understand it. And then I think the other thing that I in law school ended up doing was figuring out how to learn the material in a way that made sense to me. So found other ways, like there was an application called like Quimby that would teach it verbally and would have videos and things like that, and that was much more the way I learned than law school does. And so and I didn't really know that till law school, that I learned a little bit differently. And so I think there's really beautiful ways to learn in law school that accessing earlier, I think, can really, really support mental health. So
Great. I want to make sure we're getting through these questions, so I'm going to move on. I have two right here that are specific to some panelists. So I have one for Tori, one for Cody. Tori, yours is if you are able to elaborate on your workload and your daily responsibilities in your role.
I'll do my best to elaborate on it. So I'm prosecutor, and I have what I think of as like 4 different categories of work. I have the cases that have been submitted to the office and then assigned to me to review and assess whether or not, based on the evidence submitted, there's enough to support beyond a reasonable doubt bringing charges for a certain crime. And then if I believe that that is the case, there's a multi-step process that we go through that involves presentment to a grand jury. And then if the case is indicted, I litigate the case through the criminal proceedings, which include changes of pleas or trial. And then I also do the appeals of any cases that I have worked through that end up at the Ninth Circuit. So day to day is very different because I'm reviewing evidence, or I'm in court at different types of hearings, or I'm meeting with witnesses or with victims, or I'm meeting with opposing counsel or other attorneys in my office to talk about how a hearing should be prepped or how we're going to approach a certain issue in the case, or I'm meeting with probation to talk about how a particular defendant is doing on supervision. So there's a lot of dynamic change in the job day to day, and in terms of what my workload looks like, I have cases. I'm not sure I could give a number of cases that have been submitted to me to try to review, and then cases that are in active district court proceedings, and then cases that are up on appeal, and then cases that have gone through all of those processes and the defendant is serving what's called a term of supervised release, which is the period of time where that defendant is still subject to conditions through the United States Probation Office. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything every day, and it changes quickly, but it keeps me busy.
Cool. Thanks, Tori. Cody, I'm going to put you on the spot for this one. The question is, what are some professional distinctions that you like in your role as in-house counsel attorney compared to any other legal pursuits?
I think that's a good question. There are a lot of interesting questions that come up being an in-house attorney, or interesting issues. I think we have to be really careful about knowing who our client is. So, for example, my client is the university, the corporation that is the university. So no individual, even the president, really is not a client. We have to be careful about not advising in individual capacities, and so that can be tricky. If we don't do that appropriately, that can destroy privilege, that can lead to sanctions, that can create all sorts of issues. I was in-house at Penn State University before I was at Georgetown, and that is a fundamental question that came up and was not really addressed in the best way in 2011, well before I was there, in the midst of the Sandusky crisis. The first general counsel gave advice to the president, and a court ultimately found that was in the president's individual capacity, and it created significant problems. So we have issues come up that are kind of fundamental in ways that are not always present if you're outside counsel giving advice. I think we also try to be, I think I mentioned before, more proactive rather than reactive if we can. So I don't think law firm attorneys or outside counsel are typically being consulted early on as a policy is being developed, or as a matter's kind of developing, a student conduct issue that may lead to a dismissal, and there are issues that could raise questions. Usually outside lawyers are brought in after that has already occurred and we receive a complaint and need to litigate or try to resolve it short of litigation. So I really like that proactive piece, but I like the proactive piece, and I kind of like the other questions that come up, making sure that we're balancing our counsel role in-house with our attorney role and not blending too much. If we are making decisions for the clients, that can destroy privilege and create significant issues down the line. We have to try to maintain those balances in unique and interesting and fun and sometimes frustrating ways. Frustrating for me, frustrating for my client. But each day is very different from the one before. And that's probably the case for all the others too. But I never know what I will see from any of the offices around the university. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was my best stab at it.
Well, we are coming up on the hour here very shortly, and I want to respect everybody's time. So I'm going to ask you one final quick question that you all can answer, and that is, if you could go back and give your U of M student self one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would tell Cody to study for the LSAT rather than just wing it. But it worked out, but I think you should study for the LSAT.
I would advise myself and any person to read, like anything, like not, this is going to sound like silly advice, but like read novels, read nonfiction that interests you, read stories about people, because there's a lot more to life than just the law, but also you're going to meet so many people who have had experiences that you haven't, and that you might have difficulty imagining, or you might not be able to initially relate to. And I think reading gives you such a good insight into these real experiences that some people have that you're going to encounter. And you should, I don't know, get comfortable with the fact that other people have different lives than you and will go through things. And if you're into nonfiction, read about things that have happened to people. But my advice would be to read.
Mine would be to just enjoy it, to kind of sit back and, you know, turn off the perfectionism a little bit or a lot of bit, and enjoy it. And yeah, I think just enjoy it a little bit more.
Great.
Mine would be to not spend so much time trying to find the perfect path and to just get on a path. I think we spend a lot of time trying to plan ahead and figure out which dominoes need to fall into place to get us to where we think we want to go. And so often where you think you want to go isn't where you end up wanting to go in the long run. So I think it's far better to just be on a path and pursuing that than it is to spend so much time and angst trying to find the perfect little trail to wander down.
Awesome. We are at 1 o'clock, and that was my final question. So to everyone that hopped on the call, thank you very much. And I want to give a huge thank you to Jamie, Cody, Tori, and Asa for taking time out of their busy schedules today to join us. So once again, thank you. And until next time, go Griz.